Hi, this is Brett Sankis, and today I want to talk about measuring life happiness rather than economic progress. So traditionally, the way that we measure in the United States the growth of the development of the country is by economic growth. We are super obsessed with growth, and most countries are. That's what they measure. They measure the GDP and how we're growing, and they measure average income and things like that. And I think those are not great measurements for development and progress, because it's very clear that while economic growth is important to a point, so if you're very, very poor and your basic needs aren't met, it's clear that having those needs met makes you more happy, makes you more satisfied. But after that, growth and wealth don't equate with happiness. And the United States is a great case in point. We've had tremendous growth over the past 40, 50, a couple hundred really years if you look back at it, but we're not getting happier. At least the surveys and things, everything that they've got out there, we're not becoming a more happy people collectively or on average individually. And that shouldn't surprise us. I mean, forever, the really wise teachers, Aristotle and Jesus and any, take really any sage throughout history, Buddha, right, has preached that material wealth, the pursuit of it, is a dead end. It's not going to make you happy. Again, after a certain point. In fact, like this obsession on it, and particularly obsession of comparing yourself to others and how you're doing, is a cause of, I believe, a leading cause of depression when you get sort of caught in that mess. I think that's very common, that people are not only not getting happier, like they're getting the opposite of happy. The United Nations, the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, has started producing a World Happiness Report. And that report looks at different criteria and tries to measure the happiness of a country, of a society. That's a tough thing to measure, right? Because happiness is very subjective. And measuring one society versus another, I mean, some may just be inherently sort of less happy or satisfied. And I mean, it's really tough. But I have to applaud them for giving it a shot. So the UN's World Happiness Report looks at 6 different criteria to measure happiness. One is GDP, it's a traditional measure. Another is the perception of corruption in society, life expectancy, generosity, how generous the people are, social support, so how much support you have among people, the social safety nets, and then freedom to make life choices, how free the society is. They rank countries on this. Again, I think this is much more useful, I'll get to in a minute, with like a society's development, just looking at itself internally, than it is among societies. But the top countries, according to the UN, based on happiness, are, the first 5 are Norway, Switzerland, Iceland, Denmark, Finland. I may have 2 of those reversed. The Netherlands is up there, Canada, Sweden, New Zealand, and Australia, I think, round out the top 10. So there's a lot of Scandinavian countries. So it might just be that being wealthy and tall is all that you need to be happy. Or there's just a lot of it, I think, has to do, having worked with a lot of Norwegians and a lot of people in that part of the world, is that they've got a big social safety net, right? So in America, we are very capitalist driven and very anti-socialists, but it does make for a kinder, more generous, easier society to live in. All those countries in the top 10 are well-developed, sort of what we used to call the first world, but developed nations. Costa Rica, as I recall, weighs in around 12 or 13. That's a very different country, and they're not nearly as well-developed. The United States, if you want to know, weighs in at 14, or did in the last report. So as I said earlier, it's very difficult to compare country to country. I mean, I made a joke about maybe it's just good to be tall and wealthy, but there's so many other things that go into this, and they could be kind of objective things like climate and wealth and height and stuff like that, but they might just be that certain societies, I mean, just genetically are predisposed to being more satisfied and happier, or they might interpret the surveys in a different way. So it's really tough to draw broad sweeping conclusions. I mean, I think we could draw some, but then I think it's super important to look at how a society develops internally. Like, how are we progressing just relative to ourselves? That seems like there's a lot of use to that. So I think we have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. At the same time, rather than just focusing on, because it's easy, growth in our domestic product and our output, I really applaud this UN group for doing something to focus in on something that really matters. Because, so what's the point then to just have more income, more wealth, more stuff if we're not becoming more satisfied and happier? So the surveys and all of that, the criteria they chose, you can criticize that, there's no question. You could think this is all crazy, we should just focus on income and growth, but it's not perfect, but it's a start. And again, I think we should be careful to think automatically, to rate countries against each other, although this tells us something, but internally by focusing on it just country by country, I think it's a great thing to do because we want to be happier, more satisfied. I think it's much more important than being more wealthy. I'm really interested in what you think about that. If you think it's just absolute bunk, if you think we should be only focused on wealth, if you love it, if you think there's other criteria we should be looking at. If you have any questions or anything to add, certainly reach out. Thanks.